He's not going to hold back, though,
No.
is he? I mean, he's made no secret of his feelings about her and about Harry and her approach to the royal family and the damage that they've done.
How can they be sure that any of those conversations won't end up in a future book or in a future Netflix series or used against them in a court case? They can't be sure of that, given the kind of things, the very personal things that Harry disclosed in his book.
Hi, I'm Bronte Coy, news.com.au's royal reporter, and today I'm filling in here on The Sun's royal exclusive show while your usual host, Matt Wilkinson, is in Cape Town for Prince William's Earthshot Prize Awards. Now, with me today is broadcaster and royal correspondent Sarah Hewson, along with ITV's royal editor Chris Shipp. Welcome to you both.
Hey.
Hello.
A huge week in news with the US election, of course. Donald Trump is headed back to the White House.
Yes.
Yes, this is going to have wide-ranging impacts around the world, but what I want to talk about is what that means for Britain and the royal family. Yes, so we've got... Yeah. We know that Trump is a fan of the royals, most of them. More on that in a sec.
Yeah.
What do you think his relationship with the King and Prince William will look like, Chris?
Well, look, he's met them before, and I think the key point will be on a state visit, when he gets an invitation to come on a state visit, because then, of course, it's the King that hosts the President as the head of state of the US. And I remember when he came over when the late Queen was still alive, and he came over on a state visit. And do you remember that shot of them in Windsor when he sort of went round the back of the Queen, then he went the other way, and it all looked a bit sort of awkward. But, you know, I think he really did adore Queen Elizabeth. The problem that he's going to have with King Charles is on kind of policy. There's a president who wants to, in his words, drill, 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 and there is a king who's very keen, and also Prince William, who we talk about Earthshot this week, who are very keen environmentalists who worry about sustainability and climate change, and that's not one of Donald Trump's priorities.
Interestingly, though, the soon-to-be First Lady, again, Melania Trump, has revealed that she's actually pen pals with King Charles and that they bonded in 2019 at the state dinner over their shared interest in environmental issues. Now, obviously, you know, hers are vastly different to her husband's on this. Yes, exactly. But they do have, you know, a long relationship. Eric Trump, Donald Trump's son, revealed that he had met the then Prince Charles when Eric was just 6 years old at Mar-a-Lago. And as Chris said, I mean, Donald Trump adored the late Queen. He wasn't very happy with a book that came out this year which said she'd found him rude.
Yes.
And his response was, well, actually, people told me I was her favourite president.
But it was very important for him to get that on the record because it did seem like he had enormous respect for the royals. Now,
I was her favourite president and the crowds were really big.
I mean, yes, exactly.
Yes. Of course.
Alternative truths.
On the flip side, Trump and other members of his family have made it very clear that they're not big fans of Harry and Meghan. And I will just, to quickly summarise his key remarks. So he said Biden's administration was too gracious to Harry after he moved to the US, that he'd be on his own if it was up to him being Trump. And he also hinted in March that Harry could be deported from the US if his drug use was not declared on his visa application. Now, of course, there's this whole legal battle that's been going on regarding Harry's visa application because he discussed his drug use, his past drug use in Spare. And we don't know whether that was disclosed on the application or not. But do we think that Harry and Meghan should be a little worried about Trump's election?
I think they should be worried like kind of everyone else in the world is worried at the moment about Trump's unpredictability because Trump says one thing and then often either doesn't do it or does something completely different. So, yes, he has spoken about Harry before and has said that, you know, because of his drugs, he wouldn't necessarily have granted his visa application. But then Trump is very unpredictable. And when he gets into the White House, he might have an entirely different view to the one he's expressed before. But I think, given we know what Meghan's political sympathies are, I think, obviously, you know, she's not going to be a very happy person having Trump in the White House, and it does make their life a little bit more difficult because at some point in his presidency, he's going to be asked about it, isn't he? And he's going to give a response, and we just don't know what that response will be.
He's not going to hold back, though,
No.
is he? I mean, look, I'd like to think that he's going to have bigger fish to fry when he enters the White House again, but he is someone who's very thin-skinned. Meghan had described him in the past as being divisive and being misogynistic. He's made no secret of his feelings about her and about Harry and her approach to the royal family and the damage that they've done. But, you know, this issue, we don't know the status of Harry's visa. We don't know whether he is on the kind of visa that he did have to declare whether or not he had drug use, because there's some speculation that he could have been on an A1 visa, as a head of state visa, a member of the royal family, in which case he would have been different status and he wouldn't have had to. But it's certainly not something that's going to go away, and it won't be comfortable for either of them.
And that's the trouble when you write things down in a book and let everyone read them.
Absolutely.
There is that. And also, I mean, even just the fact, as you say, it's unpredictable and we don't know which way this is all going to go when Mr Trump enters the White House. But even the fact that he did flag it this year when he was asked about it, do you think that means Harry and Meghan may have had it in their mind? Do you think there would be a plan B? Where do you think they could go if they were to leave the US?
I don't think it will probably get to the point where they'll be kicked out of the US. After all, Meghan's a US citizen, and one of the children was born there. Of course, the other was born here. But I just kind of think it will never get that far. I'm sure there'll be a big row about it. Lawyers will be involved at some point, but I don't think they'll be planning actively to sell up in Montecito and find somewhere else to go. Maybe they could go back to Vancouver Island. Maybe do a complete rewind and do Vancouver Island and back to Windsor. Who knows?
Imagine.
Because Frogmore Cottage is still free because Prince Andrew's not in there. But
I mean, there's been some speculation about this potential house purchase in Portugal and whether that was kind of a safety net should anything happen with Harry's visa status. I mean, I think that's not necessarily connected. I mean, look, there are lots of celebrities who say they're going to pack their bags and leave now. Donald Trump is heading back to the White House. But I think that would be a step too far, given how much Meghan has made it clear that she wanted to be back in the United States.
And you think about how many celebrities supported Kamala Harris in the latter days of the campaign. I mean, I don't think they'll all be packing their bags and
We're
leaving.
not going to be seeing a mass exodus, are we?
Exactly.
Crazier things have happened, but it does seem unlikely. And lastly on that, we did discuss it just at the top there, but, King Charles and Queen Camilla may well go to the US at some point. The monarch hasn't been for a while, and they may need to go over there and sort of have a visit hosted by Trump. Now, given how Trump has spoken about King Charles's son and that whole rift and the way that he's spoken about Meghan, is this an awkward scenario that's being set up?
No, because the thing to think about the royal family is they will get on. They are very good hosts if they were hosting President Trump here on a state visit, and they would be very good guests if they were going to the United States on a state visit as well. Now, of course, in the whole time that I've been covering this beat, they haven't ever been to the United States. And obviously, if they go, there's always that problem of, are you going to go and stay with your son and daughter-in-law in California? But as the palace said at the end of the Australia and Samoa tour, that foreign visits are back on, and the King got a real tonic out of being in Australia, and he wants to do a full programme of engagements next year. I would have thought he's more likely to go to Canada, which is still one of the realms, rather than the United States.
But it is 17 years since a monarch visited the United States.
A long time,
it was 2007 when the late Queen was last there, so it is a long time. It's probably more likely that we'll have an outgoing state visit than an incoming one, given that it was 2019 when Donald Trump was last here. But Keir Starmer's government do need to do some PR with this new administration.
The other thing is that royal visits are not decided by the royal family, they're decided by the government. If the government decides, actually, we really do need to do some PR with Donald Trump and sort of massage his ego, then actually, here's the King and Queen, have them for a week.
Roll out the red carpet.
That's a very good way of doing it, actually.
Particularly given that he is such a fan of the royals. It is a great way to appeal to.
Yeah, and I'm sure Donald Trump will say, well, he didn't visit Obama and Biden, but now I've got the monarch over here. So it's entirely possible that it will happen.
It's going to be a big year next year, is all I'm hearing here.
The government's got some fences to mend with Donald Trump as well, so...
So moving on, and we just touched on it then, and there have been plenty of stories about Harry's strained relationship with his father. Something that's come out recently, though, by royal author Robert Hardman, is he suggested that there's actually another factor that may be involved in the King keeping some distance from Harry, which is the legal issue. Now, of course, Harry's in this long-running battle with UK courts over the decision to downgrade his security since he left the UK. And Hardman suggested that the reason that the King can't engage with him at the moment is because he puts himself at a serious legal risk if anything he says to Harry is then disclosed in court, particularly if it was misremembered, as has happened in the past with Harry. So how considerable do you think this factor is?
Recollections may vary, as a late Queen once said. I think it is a factor, of course it is, because and it's part of that wider problem that how can the King and Prince William, were he ever to talk to his brother ever again, how can they be sure that any of those conversations won't end up in a future book or in a future Netflix series or used against them in a court case? They can't be sure of that, given the kind of things, the very personal things that Harry disclosed exposed in his book. You add on this new layer of his fight with the Home Office about whether or not he gets royal-level security or something more bespoke, as the Metropolitan Police are currently offering him, and you can see why the King's very cautious about it, and his own legal advisors will be saying, well, this court case is still live, and therefore meeting your son and having conversations might be a potential problem.
And it's a court case with His Majesty's government in His Majesty's
yes,
court.
Yes.
And so it could be very awkward. And what aides to the royals are looking at is the Paul Burrell example back in 2002, when he was accused of stealing items belonging to Princess Diana, and then the Queen recalled a conversation with Paul Burrell when he had told her that he was keeping them safe for Princess Diana, and the whole case collapsed. And of course, were Prince Harry to recall a conversation with his father or let that happen in court, that would be extremely damaging for the King.
So it's not just hypothetical, as you say, there is a specific example where there's something quite similar.
Yeah, it's His Majesty's Home Office and His Majesty's Home Secretary that Harry is fighting.
In a lot of ways, their family dramas are relatable, but then something like that really moves it into a different
we're at a different level here.
We always say all families have arguments, but not all of us are sort of having the courts named
not
after
through our
us,
parents' court.
Ministers operating in our name.
So, yes, it's a very, very complex legal issue. It's a tricky one. And it doesn't seem likely that Harry's going to drop this case anytime soon.
He doesn't want to drop any cases, and he's got still quite a few that are live, which we better not discuss. But no, I don't think he's going to drop it because... Well, I mean, the thing is, I remember when Harry came over here very recently for the Whale Child Awards, and I distinctly remember seeing a very senior-looking Metropolitan Police officer kind of just probably taking notes or just assessing the security level, because it's not in the Metropolitan Police's interest for anything to happen to Prince Harry. So they assess he's coming over, they obviously know about it, they assess the risk against him, and they provide the security that they think he needs at that time. Harry, however, says, look, I should have a much higher level of security because my father's the king and I used to be a member of the royal family. So that argument is still very much active.
And he maintains, because he doesn't have that automatic right to security and because he sees the threat as being too great, it's not safe to bring his wife or his family back to the United Kingdom. And that then means that the King doesn't get to see his grandchildren.
And so, as I say, it's so multifaceted, this issue, particularly between the King and Prince Harry. But before we move on, I'm interested for both your takes on the state of their relationship at the moment, because I think myself, like a lot of people, thought that when Harry made that, quick dash over to the UK in, I think it was February when King Charles's cancer diagnosis was made public, it seemed like they were in a bit of a new era. But then he's been back here so many times this year, and as far as we know, they haven't seen each other. And he said publicly he'd reached out and the King wasn't available. Where do you think their relationship is at?
That was problematic in itself because that was in May when he was back in the UK for the Invictus Games 10th anniversary celebration. And he let it be known that he'd wanted to see his father, but his father's diary was too busy. I mean, just putting that information out in the public domain tells you everything. And it goes back to your point, Chris, about trust. If you can't trust that private conversations aren't going to end up in the public domain somewhere, then how can you have a conversation at all?
Yeah,
and that's a recollections may vary as well.
It was a really one-sided sort of argument, that one, wasn't it? Because we heard from Harry's office, who said the King's too busy to see me, and Buckingham Palace decided not to respond at all. But I mean,
well, it later emerged that
they were both in London at the same time.
They'd offered him to stay
in Buckingham Palace, which would have made it easy for him to see
Harry and Meghan
the King.
didn't disclose at the time.
Yes, and he didn't take it up. He chose to stay in a hotel for security reasons.
Yes, that's
because obviously Buckingham Palace isn't very secure, is it? So
famously easy to get into and visit the royals whenever you like.
All the time. Yes. You've been convicted of nothing in court. Nothing's been proven in court, but reputationally, you're damaged goods.
You can see the tears in her eyes at multiple points, actually, as she's speaking to survivors, families who've lost someone to domestic abuse.
The Earthshot Prize Awards, as I mentioned, Matt Wilkinson is there at the moment. That's been going on this week. It's really shone a light on some incredible and inspiring work that's happening. What were your highlights?
William loves the Earthshot Awards, and I've covered the one, the first one that was in London, actually was during COVID, so we covered it remotely, which was rather bizarre, wasn't it? The second one was in Boston in the USA, the third one was in Singapore, and now this one is in Africa. And I think I'm right in saying that the next one is in South America, potentially in Brazil, which will tie in with the next COP summit. Of course, whether or not Donald Trump's there is an entirely different matter. But this is a real passion project for William, absolutely Earthshot, and homelessness, as I'm sure you've discussed recently with his documentary. Those are his two big, massive passion projects. And, you know, some of them have done some amazing work. Some of the winners from a few years ago have had that access to the scale they could never have got had William and his, you know, they're such conveners, the royal family. Just get everyone in the room, and then everyone can help everyone else. And he's managed to scale up a lot of these projects. So they might start very small, but they can make a huge difference. And it's a global prize. You know, they get £1 million each of the 5 winners. And you know, and South Africa and Table Mountain and the weather looked absolutely stunning, didn't it?
Yeah, and actually for me, it was seeing William at the most relaxed we've seen him all year. He talked about his love for the continent of Africa. He said it was where he went to seek comfort as a teenager. It was where he proposed to his wife. It's also where the idea for the Earthshot Prize was born, because he was inspired by some of the projects he saw in Namibia and Tanzania back in 2018. And we've seen him so relaxed. And also, you know, this is what they describe as his Super Bowl moment, isn't it? The Earthshot Prize Awards. And there he was, literally wearing shoes made by one of the Earthshot Prize winners.
Who apparently didn't know he was going to beforehand.
Biodegradable shoes and a Prince of Wales check blazer, which was bought from a vintage shop. Everybody there on the green carpet told to wear sustainable clothing.
Love that.
And I think we saw him, you know, he was talking about the children, he was talking about Catherine. He seemed to be much more at peace.
After a very difficult year.
After
and
extremely
he's gone away to this
difficult
project, which has, again, been a very successful one. And, you know, he felt able to talk about Kate in the way in which he hasn't before.
Well,
so.
I was going to touch on that as well, because, of course, we have seen so much of William in the last few weeks with the homelessness documentary and then, of course, all the activities around Earthshot Prize. And it has been such a difficult year. When Catherine had to retreat from public duties, he also had to take a break and has obviously had to figure it out as he went along, as the family worked with her health. So does it feel like we're seeing a bit of a new era of William? He does seem relaxed and a bit more self-assured and ready.
Well, I think it started with that video that was released in September to mark the end of Kate's chemotherapy. And we really saw a much more intimate portrait of them as a couple and as a family. And he was happy for that to be out there. And then asked about the Princess of Wales. And he said, you know, she's doing really well and she's been amazing this whole year. And, you know, I know she's going to be cheering me on. Much more willing to speak than I think we've heard him. Much less guarded than perhaps we might have expected.
Absolutely the most we've heard in that sort of setting.
And you never know when you ask that question whether one of their team is going to pull you away or whether he's just going to sort of freeze up and say, wasn't expecting a question on Kate. But, I mean, look, if you were going to advise William, you're going to tell him someone's going to ask you a question about how Kate is, at least prepare an answer. And at least he was prepared to take it and share something, which is what people kind of want to hear. They just want to hear that she's OK and that she's doing all right. And, of course, we might see her a little bit more over the coming weeks. We've got Remembrance coming up, which she really wants to make. We've got the Christmas Carol concert that gets recorded sort of quite early in December at Westminster Abbey. So we might see a bit more of her.
Bit happier times for the Welleses, and it's good to see them out and about, you know, and... onto some more unfortunate health news for the royal family, although not as serious. But Queen Camilla's had to cancel some engagements with a chest infection this week. It does appear that she's on the mend because she is booked in for something next week as well. But even though she'll be out of action in person, she does have her documentary on domestic abuse coming out next week. Now, I believe you've seen it, Sarah, and you had a preview. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, this is a documentary, a 90-minute film, Her Majesty Queen Camilla Behind Closed Doors, and it has followed her for a year, focusing on her work with domestic violence and domestic abuse and trying to raise awareness of that and to give survivors a voice. And it's an incredibly powerful, hard-hitting watch. We see her never-before-seen footage of her going into a refuge, meeting survivors of domestic abuse. And she talks, you can hear the passion in her voice about why this is so important to her. It's something she's been doing for more than a decade. But she has a remarkable platform to be able to raise awareness. And watching it, I mean, we watched it at a special screening at Buckingham Palace. You could have heard a pin drop, and there were gasps, audible gasps of breath as some of the statistics came up. There's a call to the police every 30 seconds about domestic abuse, and that's those that manage to make the call. And that's seen as being only a quarter of potential cases. And it was only in 1991 that rape became a crime within marriage. Until then, it was just seen as a wife's duty. I mean, I was horrified. That's not very long ago.
I can tell it's had a big impact on you.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing, I think it will then...
I think if you watch it, it really does make you stop and think just how widespread and prevalent this is.
So the figures that jumped out at me, in fact, I got a centre preview and watched it last night at home, and the figures that jump out at you are that 3 women take their own lives every week. Every week. Because of domestic violence, and 30 women contemplated every week as well. And, you know, I've been to a refuge with Camilla before, and she does this work a lot. And even when we go on foreign trips, I mean, it doesn't always get a lot of coverage because there's so much else going on.
Yeah.
But in Australia and in Samoa recently, she went to, the charities that help women who are trying to flee abusive relationships. And I agree, I thought it was really moving, really powerful. It shows Camilla in a completely different light, but also that I think she's got not just a professional connection as, like, I'm the Queen and I'm the head of this, I'm the patron of this charity, a real kind of personal connection with the women and the survivors, and you could see that.
You can see the tears in her eyes at multiple points, actually, as she's speaking to survivors, families who've lost someone to domestic abuse. But she also talks about discussing it with her grandchildren, her granddaughters in particular, and getting the teenage girl's perspective on it. I mean, it's something she really does take home and live and breathe.
Is it fair to say, from hearing what you're both saying about the documentary, and also we discussed on the show last week the fact that Prince William's homelessness documentary showed a side of him that we had never seen before. Is it fair to say that we're seeing a different side of Camilla through this documentary?
I think so. Well, it's just a side that we kind of see on the road with her quite often. But, you know, not everything makes it into the newspapers. Not everything makes it onto the TV or on social media. So I kind of think it shows a real side of Camilla that perhaps many members of the public haven't seen before. And actually, one of the reasons this started, and she had an interest for a decade or more, but she met the mother, Diana Parks, whose daughter had been killed by her husband. And the very first meeting she went to, she heard the whole story about what happened and just how dreadful it was. And she was openly crying in that room. Yeah. She says in the documentary, even the policemen and the journalists in the room were crying as well. And you could see how she was so moved by that. I think that was the moment she thought, I've got this platform and I'm going to do something about it. And I thought, interestingly, they had the former Prime Minister Theresa May in the programme as well, talking about, isn't this amazing that we've got a Queen consort who's putting her name to this and using her platform in this way? Yeah,
Cherie Blair also in it. Sir Patrick Stewart, the actor whose father abused his own mother and he as a child witnessed it. There are some really powerful voices in there. But what comes through loud and clear for me, and I think this is what the Queen wants to achieve, is that she's giving a voice to those survivors of domestic abuse, and you really hear their stories. It's not actually all about her. She's enabling them to be able to tell their
using
stories.
Her platform. But
She's using it so effectively,
it's a balancing out when you're making a programme. You want to make it all about the member of the royal family who's taking part. But I think they've done a very clever weave between using Camilla's voice and using her as the guide, if you like, but actually, as you say, giving a voice to a number of women many women who are all fortunately survivors.
So this will air next week, and it sounds like, from what you've both said, it's a must-watch. So thank you for giving us your thoughts. Yeah. We'll move along now back to Robert Hardman's book, because there is something else in it that's generated a lot of attention recently, which is the news that the King reportedly recently finally cut Prince Andrew's alleged £1 million a year spending allowance. Now, a lot of people have been calling for this for some time. Do you think it goes far enough, though, or do you think that he should also evict him from Royal Lodge?
I think Andrew was always going to have a difficult time when there was a change of reign, because famously his mother, whether for favourite son or not, but I think as a parent you're much more forgiving of your children than a sibling is of another sibling. And that is kind of playing out in front of us now, isn't it? There's the King saying, look, you've been convicted of nothing in court, nothing's been proven in court, but reputationally you're damaged goods. You're living in this vast mansion. I would like it for something else.
And he's not a working royal. He's not working.
You're not a working royal. Do you need £1 million a year? Again, it comes back to this, and there's this whole other issue this week about the sort of private income and the duchies of Cornwall and Lancaster. But the King has this private income. There's nothing to do with the taxpayers' money that he can decide what to do with. And clearly the late Queen was quite happy to give some of that money to her son, Prince Andrew, but the King isn't.
What I found most interesting in Robert Hardman's book is that he says that the Queen, the late Queen, was planning, if she'd lived another year, she was planning to
Reluctantly
evict
was finally...
Would she?
from Royal Lodge. But would she ever
Yeah.
have done it? Because, as you say, he's was always thought to be her favourite son. And, look, the King doesn't relish confrontation either, does he? And I think he's hoped that through these various channels, by, cutting off the security provision, because it's not within the security ring of steel on the Windsor estate, and by cutting off the funding for Prince Andrew, that might force him out, because, it's a big place. It's falling into disrepair, as we've seen photos of it. And, what does he need a 30-room mansion for?
And it's the optics of that. It's, Frogmore Cottage is sitting there empty. As you say, it's a 30-room mansion that apparently just has him and Fergie in it.
And he's adamant that he has a cast-iron lease with the Crown Estate. It's not for the King to meddle in that. He's got it till 2078, which will be beyond his lifetime, but he clearly wants to hand it on to his daughters. And that he apparently has alternative sources of income now through some of his contacts from international trade. I'm not sure that his wealthy benefactor friends have done him any favours in the past, a la Jeffrey Epstein,
That's
have they?
clear, no. And often got him into trouble, even if you take Jeffrey Epstein out of the picture. But no, I kind of agree with you. And what you say about optics is very important, because do you remember when they had that Easter service and Prince Andrew was sort of like front of the pack?
Yes.
Grinning like a Chester cat. I kind of think anyone advising him, or maybe he should advise himself and say, well, given everything's happened, hang back, look a bit sombre, read the room, just
more of a target on his back, I think, with King Charles needing to take action as well. I personally think, that's just my opinion. But when you're right in front of everyone all the time and you have suffered such reputational damage. But before we move on from Prince Andrew, something that I do wonder is when King Charles takes this action, which he has been under pressure to do, does he put Prince Andrew in a position where he has nothing to lose? He does need to earn money. We don't know exactly how he's doing that. Are you looking at a situation where if he's cut off and needs to earn money, he's doing a Spare 2.0? We're getting a tell-all.
No, surely not.
We're getting a docuseries. We're getting a docuseries.
Newsnight was damaging enough for him, wasn't it? Surely he can't. And you would
We've
like
had
to think...
two films after Newsnight as well.
Exactly.
But he didn't do them, but with nothing to lose.
But surely, for his daughter's sake... They have been through enough, Beatrice and Eugenie, and you do feel for them. And surely they would say, please, no.
I do think they'd be the voice of reason there. That's a good
You'd
point.
hope.
So maybe no Spare 2.0. We'll see, though. We are going to finish up with a few quick-fire royal questions. Are you both ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah. OK. Anyone can jump in first, whoever you like. So we've had that update on the Andrew saga, which has caused years of headaches for the royal family. What do you think has been the biggest PR headache for them, though, in the last 10 years?
Oprah.
Yeah, I was going to say racism allegations, although Harry went and then took off racism allegations, said I never said that. But, yeah, Oprah Winfrey, for sure.
Winfrey, because it came before Spare, came before Netflix, and the allegations that were made about racism, potential racism, but also about Meghan being ignored when she made pleas for help over her mental health.
And was contemplating taking her own life. So, yeah, for sure. But then Prince Andrew also massively damaging.
Yeah.
Not great.
Not great. It's been a big few weeks of royal tours and events. You've both been on the beat for some time. So can you tell me what is your most memorable royal outing that you've covered, please, and why?
I mean, memorable, it has to be the funeral of Queen Elizabeth, because we haven't seen anything on that scale in my lifetime. And then subsequently the coronation. But for me, the funeral was a real moment when the nation, it kind of felt like the world had stopped.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, the moment of that funeral was seeing her coffin on that gun carriage passing Buckingham Palace for the very last time as it went up Constitution Hill before it got in. And, yeah, it really was.
Yeah, the funeral, the coronation, the royal weddings, all those big ones. But there are also the tours. We've had... You've been in Australia. We've got Prince William in South Africa. For me, a couple of tours. Going to Lesotho with Prince Harry and seeing the work he was doing with Centre Ballet, country that, very few people visit. And also with then Prince Charles and Duchess of Cornwall going to the Galapagos Islands, which is truly remarkable.
I missed out on those because that was before my time. I would give you Cuba with the then Prince Charles and Duchess of Cornwall. That was just fascinating, just being in Cuba, being in Havana with them, and also Pakistan with William and Kate, which was a phenomenal tour. And we went up into the Hindu Kush up to see some glaciers. That was It's quite
You
something.
guys have seen some things.
It's
is what I'm
right,
hearing.
isn't it?
You've been around.
You know, to be paid to do it is actually a bit of a privilege sometimes, isn't it? Yeah.
And so the last one, and given that you have been away with them and you've been in close proximity with the royals for some time, so lastly, Brooklyn Beckham did an interview this week and he called William the, quote, sweetest guy ever. Who do you think is the nicest royal?
My favourite royal, when I get asked this question, I've always got the same answer, Camilla, the Queen. And I said that when she was Duchess of Cornwall as well. She's always kind of the most friendly one when you do engagements. She's the one that kind of recognises what you're doing as a member of the press as well. She's the happiest to chat. I mean, I use this word sort of sparingly, but she's just kind of the most normal. And I think actually talking about the documentary we did earlier, that sort of does come through.
I mean, the Princess of Wales is quite an obvious answer, isn't it? But I've seen her in mum mode as well as in princess mode, and she is just like a normal mum with the kids and with other children as well.
And she's buying the Halloween costumes in the supermarket. And things.
Well, she didn't need to in the past, did she? Because she could have got it from mum and the party pieces business.
Oh, yeah.
But I would also say the Duchess of Edinburgh, Sophie, who is extraordinarily kind. Her way with people is truly remarkable. And I remember...
She quietly goes about her business.
Quietly goes about her business. And she's also unafraid to show her emotions. I remember after the Duke of Edinburgh died and she was driving back through the gates of Windsor, she'd been one of the first to go and visit the late Queen, and we were broadcasting live for Sky, and she stopped and we asked her how she was, and she had tears in her eyes and she said, the Queen is just amazing. And I just think she's a huge asset, and the work that she does around, you know, gender-based violence in conflict is remarkable. It affects her, and she has a huge impact as well.
Thank you both so much for sharing these stories. It's been amazing to chat to you both about it all, and I really appreciate your time. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy the show, then please let us know in the comments. We love to read them. And subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode.